California is obviously the largest state in the country, and so we have an enormous number of kids who are going through an education system that's intended to prepare them not just for the workplace and the jobs of the future, but to be citizens of an engaged democracy. And so we want that school system to prepare the citizens of the future.
Here's the evidence that there's hope, and we're also not shy about saying here are the things that need to be fixed.
Equity has to be about whether all of the appropriate resources, in the sense of whole child success, are being deployed in a way that fits the needs of individual students.
What data helps us understand whether the things we're trying to do to improve student achievement are actually working?
The first finding is really that we are on the right road, and we just have to kind of build capacity to get there better.
The achievement gap is measured usually 3rd grade to 8th grade because that's when we do achievement tests. But one of the things we know from the data in California is that that gap is there long before children are in 3rd grade. In fact, it's there before children even enter kindergarten. So if we want to address the achievement gap in any kind of meaningful way in California, we're going to have to pay attention to those early years when it's beginning to develop.
You have charter schools in urban areas and in suburban areas actually performing at extremely high levels, especially in terms of how they serve traditionally disadvantaged subgroups of students and students who are achieving at very low levels.
It seems that California isn't providing the same kinds of educational opportunities for its low-income and its middle-income students as other places around the country, and I think we've got to figure out what to do about that.
English learners in California are just one of the lowest performing populations, so we really care about how they're taught.
I think that there has been persistent academic achievement gaps along race and class lines in which school resources matter a great deal.
First of all, 80% of districts in California are experiencing teacher shortages. The shortages are most severe in certain subject areas like STEM fields and special education and bilingual, but they are widespread. They are most severe in the districts that serve the highest proportions of students of color and low-income students, but even in the most wealthy suburbs, they are struggling to find teachers in some of these subject areas.
Many school districts, perhaps most school districts, are not capable of launching this process of continuous improvement on their own. They're going to need a lot of help. And we have the pieces of an infrastructure of support in place, but those pieces have not been knit together into a system.
The state collects a ton of data that isn't widely made available for research or policy making or back to the districts themselves. So there's some low-hanging fruit.
These days it looks like California school districts are better funded than they have been in years, possibly ever. But we also see that California districts are consistently lower funded than districts in many other places in the country. That gap has been closing recently since the local control funding formula was adopted. But still we see California somewhat below the national average, and there are reasons to think that California districts might have special costs that might make us even more concerned about some of those differences.
I guess the big issue that the report is about, the pension issue for California schools. The central issue is that the contribution rates are increasing fairly dramatically. And I think where that really matters for folks who care about schools is that's money that has to be spent out of district budgets, out of employee paychecks, and out of the general fund for California that goes to education but is not being used to help educate children.
California is a mid-spending state in the country, but because we're such a high-cost state, that means that the dollars that are really available in terms of the resources for kids are quite low. So we have hardly any librarians, hardly any school counselors, very little health services in the schools, things that other states supply for students.
Unfortunately, the vast majority of elementary schools in California have absolutely no mental health services inside their school buildings. And even at the high school level, California is at the bottom in terms of offering guidance counselors. Almost a quarter of all California districts have at least one high school where there's no counselors at all for students.
I've been interested for a long time, along with my colleagues, around the local control funding formula and the ways in which this is a statewide effort to involve stakeholders in helping make decisions around resource allocation and goals for schools and school districts.
A key finding is that when you talk to or survey principals, teachers, educators of all stripes, they say Yeah, this is good.
LCFF spending induced changes in school spending led to significant improvements in both high school graduation rates and improvements in academic achievement. And those were disproportionately or most pronounced among more disadvantaged students.
One of the things that came up very strongly in a range of our data sources was a call to stay the course in terms of like the big policy elements.
The pace of change in California, the demographic change, the changes in the fiscal outlook, there's just too much going on to wait 10 years for another snapshot of this sort.